Hello, and welcome to American Heron Wargaming. This is a strategy video for Fallout Factions. It's not the typical sort of strategy video where you're talking about how to win the game. This is more of a meta strategy discussion. Because personally, one of the things that drew me the most to Fallout Factions was the fact that I already had a fairly large collection of Fallout Wasteland Warfare miniatures. So that theoretically would let me leverage my existing model collection. However, Fallout Factions is a what you see is what you get, or WYSIWYG game, where equipment that a model has should be effectively represented on the game piece. Fallout Wasteland Warfare was much more focused on who the characters were rather than what they were carrying. So you could have Boone, for example, but give him an anti-material rifle or a Ripper or whatever, and it didn't matter that his model had a hunting rifle. So one of the things that I have been thinking about for a long time, now that the game is out, is exactly what sort of crews could I build out of my existing model collection. One of the things about Fallout Factions is that the model's equipment is very strictly controlled by the game's designers. There's no mix and match and decide what sort of weapons you want to have. You're given a list, and you have to pick from that list. This makes the factions a lot more easy to balance, and they have said that one of the reasons that they wanted to go with this is that since the game is WYSIWYG, you don't want to have your models have to change equipment as they advance, which I think is a pretty smart idea. However, this has meant that the way that the faction lists are built, there are some models which you actually have in a faction, but you can't actually use, because their equipment isn't represented in those lists. So with all that, I wanted to see if I could make a couple of different gangs for a couple of different factions and see how easy or hard that would be. Ideally, I wouldn't use any conversions, or at least not many, and I would use my existing collection and try not to bend the rules too hard, and try not to bend believability too hard. So, starting off with the survivors, and I had to break basically every single rule that I set out for myself at the beginning of this exercise. My leader is a local leader with a combat rifle, and that's a Nora model that I converted by taking her 10mm pistol and swapping it for the combat shotgun of a vault security officer. However, I realized that she could also be easily swapped for Lucas Sims, since a combat rifle and the Chinese assault rifle are pretty close analogs. Next up, I have two specialists, both hunters. One has the double-barreled shotgun, which is represented by one of the shotgun survivors, and the other one is represented by Boone with a precision hunting rifle. Then I have two security guards with combat rifles. Those are the vault security officers, and I know those are technically supposed to be combat shotguns, but the combat rifle and the combat shotgun look pretty similar. They also probably shouldn't have those batons since they don't have hand weapons, but we're doing what we can here. The next model is a security guard with a hunting rifle, but this is a model stolen from the Railroads line. It's one of their heavies with a hunting rifle. Next up, we have a swatter with baseball grenades and baseball bat, and there's no model that really represents that in the existing range. However, I happen to have my custom Nuka Slugger miniature that I've used throughout the years, and I thought he would be a perfect fit here. Finally, last but not least, I had Sturgis, representing my settler with a pipe revolver and a hand weapon. Honestly, one of the biggest problems that I had when building settlers lists was that so many of them are based on having pipe revolvers, whereas many of the miniatures that are for the survivors range are using pipe pistols. But with all that cheating out of the way, I could go on to a list which was a bit more straightforward. My Wasteland Raiders list is a pure swarm list, basically because that's what's supported by my existing collection. I really only have one Raider power armor model that could represent a boss, and one of the Raider champions requires having power armor. So I could have used something unaligned, but I wanted to go with as many Raider-specific models as I could. So my Raider boss is using the assault rifles. Then I have two veterans to the left and right of her, one with a pipe rifle and one with a sawn-off shotgun. Then I have a scaver with a pipe rifle that's actually represented by a survivor's model, but it's close enough. Then I have two scavers with sawn-off shotguns that are the enslaved tech, but honestly they've always looked more Raider-y than survivor-y anyways. Next up, I have three psychos with baseball grenades and hand weapons, and those are the regular Raider psychos. Then I have a single psycho with a pipe revolver and head weapon. Honestly, I was going to have four psychos with baseball grenades and hand weapons, but there's actually a limit so that you can only have three of each equipment type. Then I have one scum with a pipe pistol and a machete, and then I have three more scum with pipe pistols and Molotov cocktails. Those are the ones on the right. So we've got a lot of explosions, a lot of area of effects, and a lot of activations. I didn't have too much issues finding models in my Raiders collection which could be used in Fallout Factions. In fact, I had the opposite problem where I had so many that had the same loadout that I had to drop a couple and make room for the survivor models simply because you could only have three of each loadout type. Next up were the super mutants. And this list was particularly interesting because most factions, you have a champion limit of 3, which means that you have 1 boss and then 2 champions to go in your list, and then you fill it out with grunts. However, as a tier 1 gang, super mutants only have a champion limit of 2, so you have 1 boss and 1 champion. And since you can only have 5 grunts per champion, that makes it a little bit more limited in how large your force size can be, at least from the get-go. For my mutant gang, my leader is a master with the short hunting rifle and super sledge. You don't see the short hunting rifle, but it's on there. The super sledge is the one that's more important to represent. My other champion, a brute, has a minigun, as the super mutant faction does need some range support from time to time. Then I have 2 skirmishers with automatic pipe rifles. Those are just the default super mutants that come in the box set, so they work out nicely here. Then I use the strong model that I have to represent an enforcer with Molotov cocktails and super sledge, which actually works out kind of nicely since strong doesn't really have a lot of armor on, so he looks more like a grunt than a champion. I have 2 more enforcers with hand weapons and Molotov cocktails. Those are the other 2 skirmishers from the Wasteland Warfare line. And then the aviator, who is an enforcer with a pipe pistol and hand weapon. Technically he has 2 pipe pistols in his hand, but you never know, maybe one of them doesn't work and he just uses it as a hand weapon. I don't have the largest super mutant collection, but I felt like the ones that I had were pretty well represented in the force list. In terms of collections that I really don't have much of, I did want to make up a Brotherhood of Steel list, but this is not one that was entirely my idea. After playing my first game of Wasteland Warfare against the Brotherhood of Steel, I was talking to my opponent, and we were joking about whether or not it would be possible to have an entire list simply full of power armor. So I guess this is the closest thing that Fallout Factions has to a meme list, but it does technically work. With 1 paladin with a flamer at 67 points, and then 3 knights with laser rifles at 60 each, you have exactly 247 points. So that's a full list right there. It's only got 1 champion and fewer than 5 grunts. And those knights are pretty damn tough, so this might be a hard list to take out, but you would definitely have problems with action economy. Still, it might be worth trying. So, having covered all the gangs in the most latest sourcebook, that's actually pretty good. I've got 4 solid lists that I could go with. However, watching the current season of the Fallout show, it got me thinking about the Mojave section of the setting, and that gave me a cheeky idea over the holidays for a list to try to build. This one also breaks a lot of the rules that I've set out ahead of myself. But that is my Cowboys list. Earlier, I mentioned that there were not a lot of Survivor models that had pipe revolvers, but it did remind me that I had a lot of miniatures that had regular revolvers, and that is some Cowboys that I modeled up for Dead Man's Hand, but never ended up playing. So I had this wacky idea to use them as a factions crew, and just assume that every revolver that they're holding is a pipe revolver. My leader is a local leader that has a sawn-off shotgun and an officer's sword. She's represented by Kate, which I know has a baseball bat and not a sword, but this was the closest I could get. The only other Fallout miniature I have in this list is Cass, who is my specialist hunter with a double-barreled shotgun, but that's exactly what she's got, so it works out perfectly. Then I have a security guard with a hunting rifle. Then I have 2 swatters, one with a sawn-off shotgun and hand weapon, and then another one with a pipe revolver and hand weapon. Finally, I have 4 settlers, one with a double-barreled shotgun, and then 3 with the pipe revolver and hand weapon loadouts. So, assuming that we're treating revolvers as pipe revolvers, this actually works out nicely. The only other issue with this is that the Dead Man's Hand models are on 25mm bases and not the 30s that are used by Wasteland Warfare and factions, but I'm working on a quick fix for that. So even though this one doesn't technically count, I do still like it, and I like the idea, so I think I might be rolling with this for a little while. With all that said, I had a lot of fun putting all these lists together, and I know I don't have the largest collection of Fallout Wasteland Warfare miniatures ever, so if you have a bigger collection or even just a different collection, you might be able to do something different from what I did, but I thought this would be an interesting way to look at what's available and how you can use it across games. I'm pretty sure I got all the list building rules correct on this one. Took a couple round trips to be sure. However, if you noticed any mistakes that I made, please feel free to point them out in the comments. That's all for now. Stay safe out there in the wasteland.